Welcome back. So we're going to talk about the transforming aspect of Photoshop. I'm using the word transform. You'll see why in a moment. And the best way to go about doing simple edits is usually going to be with our marquee. But sometimes we don't need the marquee. So in this case, you can see that this page is obviously crooked. Maybe it was on the scanner crooked. Maybe the original that we scanned was actually crooked. Whatever the case, if I transform, that will give me the option to rotate. You may recall from our last video that I have a shortcut Command Shift R, or on the PC Control Shift R, and that item will actually get me into a transform mode. Do you see these handles here now? And I have this arrow, my mouse has turned into this double arrow that shows me that I'm in rotate mode. I'm actually going to just exit out of that. That works, but quite frankly, an easy enough way to get there is through the transform. So because we're dealing with a layer, not a background, this is not a background, this is a layer right now, I can actually go ahead and just Command T is transform. And now when I'm in transform, you can see I have a variety of arrows. So I have an arrow down in the bottom right hand corner here now, a double-headed arrow that's straight out on each side, which allows me to stretch. However, we don't want to do that, so I'm going to undo that, Command Z. If I hold the Shift key while I drag this, it will constrain proportions. And you can see that whatever size I'm changing it to, it's the same proportion. So if you're going to scale manually, you're going to want to hold the Shift key while you do that. But back to our rotate, I actually, if I can move my mouse, I just wait until I get the right icon, and then I can rotate. And so if you look closely, you'll see I'm rotating it. It is also showing me the degrees in which I'm rotating it. And so I can, if I want, just loosely eye it here, a negative 0.5 degrees. Now when I hit enter, that is going to execute the transform. So if we go to my history tab, you'll see that I've opened the file, I drew a rectangular marquee, I deselected the rectangular marquee, and then I free transformed. It won't specify what transformation I did because maybe I did a few things. It just shows me that I did a transformation. Now if I go back in my history and I click on deselect, it undoes that free transform. I can actually go back all the way to here, and now my rectangular marquee, which you can see here, is selected again. And I can go all the way back to when I opened the document. And then I can come back here to where I was. So that's one way we rotate it. But let's go back to this so I can show you another way to rotate, and that is with the ruler. So I can select I, which is the eyedropper. If I use Shift I toggle all the way through to the ruler that you can see over here. So we have the ruler tool. Now I do not use this method a lot. I find I don't know, it doesn't, I don't, maybe it's too accurate and it just doesn't look that great to me. I'm going to zoom in for this, and what I'm going to do is draw a line. And I'm not actually drawing, that's the wrong word. I'm simply putting a line down on the file. And the reason I zoomed in, and I actually probably should be zoomed in even farther, is because this line is going to give Photoshop a reference point for how the current image is oriented. And so I want it to be as exact on that staff line. Staff lines are fairly reliable for us. They're very consistent. They're generally very straight. So in this case, I've drawn a line on top of the staff line. And now if I move my mouse to the top of the window, you will see it says straighten layer. And if I click on that, it will now, based on what it knows the X and Y axis to be, it will actually straighten it. But I feel like it over straightens it a little bit. That to me just doesn't look great to my eye. So I a lot of times do it manually. But it also could be because my line wasn't perfectly attuned to the pixels on the page. It also could be that those staff lines are just wonky enough on an older printing like this to have thrown it off. But those are two methods to rotate. We're going to use the transform tool for other things too. I can, because I have a separate layer here, I can actually go ahead and Command X. I take that back. I need to take my marquee. I've selected my marquee. I'm going to do Command A to select all. And now I can do Command X, and I've removed that from the page. I can do Command V, and I can paste it. So in this layer, I can be doing this. Now when I pasted it, it automatically pasted it as a second layer. And so if I want to merge those layers, I can do Command E. Now sometimes I want to work in separate layers, and you will see that on different, on some subsequent videos and some of the projects we do, that having individual layers will actually benefit you at one point in your project for moving things around without them clashing, without having to draw new marquees. But generally, at the end of your project, you want to have as few layers as possible because they take up more file space. But let's take our marquee, and let's say that I need to move this system of these two staves to another page. So I have just drawn a marquee. We're going to look at two other things here. Let's say I want to be particularly precise. Well, then what I can do is I can hold the Alt key while I drag this, and that will remove part of the marquee. In fact, it doesn't have to just be on the outside of the marquee. My selection can be, so I've just deselected this area. So let's say there were some dynamics in there that were wrong. I probably would just erase them. But or maybe there's just for whatever reason, let's say that I want to exclude those white pixels, because that's what they are. They're white pixels. And so I'm excluding them this way, and that might help me when I paste it to another page. And so you can see here, Alt dragging does that. Now if I use the Shift, that will add things back. So let's say I want to have this Violin 1 label in there, then I would use the Shift. But I don't, so I'm going to go ahead and use the Alt and get rid of some of those white pixels. So now I have a marquee around this top stave that you can see here. And so if I Command X, I've cut it. And now I could paste it on another page. In this case, I'll just make a new page. So I'm going to do Command N, and I can either choose clipboard size, or I can choose any of my default sizes I already have in here. I'm going to do 10 by 13 because that's what we're working in. And I will paste it like this. And I can move it around because it's an independent layer. And I can actually do a lot of things with it. So if I do Command T for transform again, we talked about scaling and rotating. The scaling I can do in a different way. If we move up here to the top, remember our chain link. I'm going to select our chain link, and I will choose, in this case, just for the sake of argument, let's say I want it at 108%. So now I can select 108. You'll see that both the width and the height are proportions are constrained, so we're moving the whole thing at 108%, and now I just made that bigger. In fact, what I could do is I could go to a page like this. I select my marquee tool with the M, and then Control A selects the entire page. Command A on the Mac. Command T is then going to transform, and now I could take this entire page and blow it up 108%. And I can even use my arrow keys. I'm sorry, I have to get out of my scale tool, 108, so I'll hit Enter to get out of there. And with my arrow keys, I can nudge it, and I'm sorry that covers up the screen, my little handy keyboard shortcut visualizer. But we can move this around is the point. And so you can scale it and move it around, and once you're happy with all of that, now obviously in this case we would need to rotate it too a bit, then you can hit Enter, and you have your finished product. Now once again, if we look at our history, I can simply go back to select canvas, and even though I did 3 or 4 things, it really only shows up as one, free transform, and I can undo that. Well, we're going to save that for another video session. So I hope this helps you understand the marquee tool and a little bit about transforming, how to rotate, how to scale, and gets you on your way to using Photoshop.